Welcome back to Analyze. Now, last week we touched on a very interesting experiment. It's sometimes called the Stanford Marshmallow Experiment, and you can look it up on Wikipedia and you can Google it, and there's lots and lots of references to it. It is a groundbreaking experiment that was performed in the 70s by a researcher at Stanford University in the United States, in which a number of students, and these are between the ages of 4 and 6 years old, very, very young children, were taken into a room which didn't have any sort of distraction in it, and they were offered a treat. And let me turn over to Brother Joel. And Joel, can you tell us about that experiment?
Yes, they were offered a treat, and they were told that if they deferred eating that treat, then they would be given a second treat after 15 minutes. And it turns out that only 1/3 of all the people, of all the children, were able to defer the treats. But the interesting thing was the follow-up, because the researchers followed the families or were familiar with the families. And a number of years later, they tracked down how those children were doing, the ones that deferred the treat compared to the ones who didn't defer the treat.
Okay, so these are 4 to 6-year-old children,
right,
who were taken into a room.
Yes.
They're offered a treat. Could
Yes.
be a marshmallow, could have been an Oreo cookie, could
Yes.
have been something else.
Right.
Okay? And they were told to be patient for 15 minutes.
That's
and
right.
if they were able to be patient for 15 minutes,
Yes.
they would get a second one.
Yes.
If not, then they would be just given the one, they would just get
Right.
that one treat.
And only 1/3 of them were able to do that.
Okay, so these are kids very young, obviously,
Right.
and 15 minutes is a long, long time for a 4 or 6-year-old.
Mm-hmm.
Remarkable.
Especially when there's a treat sitting on the table.
Remarkable. And what did the children do during that 15-minute period? Were they allowed to play games, or were they allowed to do other things?
They weren't given any other stimulus or anything. They were just sitting in the room, and some of them just turned their back to the treat, wouldn't look at it. Some of them treated the treat like a pet and petted it, and someone just did things to defer the gratification, whatever they came up with.
Yes, interesting.
And of course, the ones that ate it just ate it right away.
So 2/3 of them ate
That's right.
ate the marshmallow,
Yeah.
and I believe I read somewhere that some waited 14 and a half minutes and then ate. They couldn't hold it. They ate the marshmallow right at the end of the experiment,
Right.
and others ate it right away. But 2/3, so 66%, 67% of the children.
Yeah.
And this is a large study, right? 600 students. Am I right?
600 students, right?
Yeah, so
and
this
it's
is a
been
significant
replicated many times. So
Replicated.
it's not a one-off experiment. It's been
Okay.
replicated many times.
So here we have this situation where these kids have to essentially fast, for want of a better term. They don't have any other form of food. It's not that they can pass over the marshmallow and eat the Oreo cookie. And 15 minutes is a long time for a very young child. And after that, they followed this experiment. They followed the subjects of this experiment, something like 18 years later. So they would have been between the ages of 22 and 24.
Yes.
So these are young adults now.
Yeah.
What was the finding?
Well, they found out that they had better grades in school. They were more focused. They were significantly more competent in just all around school scores and their life in general compared to the other kids.
And the other kids didn't fare as well.
They didn't fare as well.
Didn't fare as well.
No.
So the children who displayed self-restraint, who displayed characteristics of deferring of self-gratification, these are the children who, in the long term, were able to have a better outcome for themselves.
We're successful, basically.
Brother Osama, how does that tie into the notion of fasting then, from an Islamic standpoint? So here we are supposed to fast a minimum of a month, a lunar month, and delay gratification, essentially voluntarily delay our gratification of food and water from dawn to sunset. We're adults, of course, and we have more staying power than 15 minutes. Now, and the Quran talks about taqwa, we mentioned this last time, that fasting is prescribed for us as it was prescribed for those before us, namely the people from the earlier messages, so that we may gain taqwa, so that we may gain this quality of self-restraint, among other things.
Actually, from a Quranic point of view, this would look like the And of course, the people who set up this experiment, they were not really testing fasting. They were not testing perhaps anything other than exploring the normal, potential research and without much of a perhaps expectation. But from a Quranic point of view, you would think this is a perfect experiment to simulate fasting and simulate Ramadan. Because if you look at the subjects who are, 4 years, 6 years old, and you understand that for a child, that's why fast, from the Quranic point of view, of course, children are exempted from fasting and they are not to fast, especially at that age, they're not to fast. So children are always, as you know, they are always on the go. They are always motivated, they are always engaged, they are always wanting to eat something or the other, especially if you put some candies or sweet stuff or whatever. So it is amazing that for that particular age, that this window of 15 minutes, maybe it's equivalent to the whole day. Because of two things. First, the nature of the psychology of the child, that the child is really beyond restraint in terms of their whatever, the fulfillment and all what they are doing is fine, okay, and then perhaps is provided. And the other thing is that perhaps they were chosen, these particular items, that are of interest to the child. So it perfectly simulates, I think, even in time frame. If you're looking at it from the Quranic point of view, this seems to be perfect, amazing, great. And I think we, as Muslims, perhaps could gain some understanding here. Also, perhaps guided by the Quran, because the Quran says, look up, and because there is a lot of knowledge that are going to be unveiled and is going to develop and is going to come up. And this will explain actually what Allah commands, and it explains what Allah created, and it explains the whole setup, like the verse which says, we are going to show you, sanurihim ayatina, we are going to show you our signs, our evidences, in the horizons outside yourself, the universe and the habitat and the whole thing, and also from within yourselves. And of course, those are the idea of fasting is an ayah, as you know. The fact it is a sign of God, because it's a command of God. It is part of His creation and part of His command. And therefore, it cannot be just done haphazardly. It is a sign. That means if you look into it carefully and see it carefully, you are going to dig into it. It is based on knowledge and based on understanding. And there you are, you connect with that infinite knowledge, that originated us and made us.
So in that sense, in fact, when the Quran speaks of that fasting, cause and effect.
Yes.
Fasting, cause, effect, an increase in self-discipline, in terms of self-restraint, in terms of awareness. In fact, I think the word awareness, taqwa.
Taqwa, yes.
So the Quranic notion of, I suppose, the ideal person is indeed a person who's very aware, a person who is, most aware, because that in fact leads to an outward function. They're not just, they're not just inwardly focused, but they're outwardly focused.
Yeah, because that is the person you would like to have.
Yeah.
Because as we also touched on this earlier, that the universe itself was a central issue of creation.
Yes.
That actually, if you go back to the story of creation of humanity, you will find that when Allah was kind of responding to the angel's concern about the choice of humanity, that He was telling him that, of course, Allah knows that which they don't know. And the focus was on the fact that the humanity was prepared to understand the knowledge that is within the universal structure, and to, of course, transmit, develop, bring it about, and therefore also have a better understanding of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this also will increase their consciousness, not only of their environment, but the consciousness of that which is behind that environment.
And in fact, then in a sense, when the Quran makes a claim, for example, A causes B,
yes,
that claim is testable.
Yes.
And this experiment, in a sense, is a test of this hypothesis.
That's true. That's how it's amazing.
Especially since that it has been, reproduced so many times. Now, in fact, when you mentioned that children are in Islam, children are not required to fast.
Yes.
I remember when as a little child and growing up now, I've seen my children go through this process as well. They very much want to try fasting,
Yes.
and they try these mini fasts. Some are 15 minutes long and some are longer.
Yes.
But that is an interesting outcome. So there is a training process as well. So here
Yes.
is, and when we come back, we'll talk more about the Stanford science experiment right after these messages. But we'll explore the notion of the experiment as a training for children. Don't go away. We'll be right back.